there are certainly guys that come in and run Truck Series races and ARCA races and Xfinity Series races that have less of a business being on track than these two did.
I feel like everywhere is just normal at this point, right? Like you have to be good on road courses. You have to be good on super speedways. All that stuff is in the playoffs.
No, Denny, you're not going to pass me on the outside, and Kyle, you're not going to pass me on the inside. I've got the best car here. I've got this figured out. It's my race to win. I don't want to hear nothing about it. Checkered flag, what's for lunch?
Welcome on to the Backstretch. I'm News 5's Heather Williams, and I don't know, do we have something to talk about after Phoenix? The thing I love about this sport is there are never a short of storylines. There's always something to talk about. I guess we'll talk about the biggest storyline so far this year, and that has been Christopher Bell. You know, I'm his favorite reporter. He told you last week here on the Backstretch. I think I've told this story before, but it's really funny to me because when Christopher went on, I guess, kind of his first heater of his Cup career, now 3 years ago, and he walked off and made it to a championship by four by walking off with a win at the Roval and walking off with the win at Martinsville. I was at both of those races that he won. And he just kind of decided that I was his good luck charm because I had interviewed him both times in Victory Lane. It's really funny because when he didn't win the championship that year and he came up to me at the banquet, he was like, "You weren't in Phoenix." I think it's really fun that he still thinks of me like that, but obviously, as I said to him last week, he doesn't need me at the track anymore to win races. He is far beyond that. And it's really been fun and exciting to watch the development of Christopher Bell as a Cup Series driver. To me, he's becoming everything that people think that Kyle Larson is. Not that Kyle Larson's not amazing. Kyle Larson is an amazing driver. He can drive anything you get into. But from what I've seen recently, Christopher is less checkers or wreckers than Larson is. And I think that potentially gives him a higher ceiling. Both of them have ceilings out of the stratosphere. So it's kind of even funny that we're having this conversation. And I like both drivers a lot. And I think both of them have the ability to be multiple time champions. But just seeing Christopher kind of quietly sneak up into the conversation with Kyle Larson, to quietly start putting him in the stratosphere of the top drivers in the sport. Larson, Denny Hamlin, Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney, Chase Elliott, Christopher Bell has arrived onto the scene, and it's really fun to see happen. We'll talk about that, of course, with our crew chief, Chris Carrier. We will also talk about kind of the other big topic of debate here recently, which is who gets approved to run in races and who doesn't. A lot of people giving a lot of grief to Catherine Legg after her run at Phoenix. I get into this a bunch with Chris, so I don't want to get into it too much here, but she was not in the greatest equipment. She got 20 minutes of practice and 2 qualifying runs, and then they said, go. Part of that, a lot of that is on NASCAR. I think she's talented enough to get behind a wheel and hold her own. And I say this with Chris just as much as several other people that have gotten cars in recent years, but she wasn't really put in a position to succeed. And that, especially as a woman in this sport, just in general, in life, it's one of the things that frustrates me a lot. When you throw someone out there and you don't put them in a position to be successful, it gives people the opportunity to pick at things that they really shouldn't be picking at. So I'll get into my opinion on this much more with Chris. You'll want to stick around for that. Our guest this week is Alex Bowman, coming off the race at his home track. I actually interviewed him before he went out to Phoenix, but a great conversation with Alex. He's another one of those drivers that is sneaky good. One of the things I talk about with Alex is, do you want to be known as a sneaky good driver, a driver that nobody talks about, or do you just want to be known as a good driver? And his answer might actually surprise you. I think it's a great conversation with Alex. Always enjoy talking to him. So let's get started. Joining us now is our crew chief, Chris Carrier, who's also the crew chief of the number 75 Food Country Truck in the Craftsman Truck Series. Now, this is not a repeat of last week's podcast, but yes, Christopher Bell won again, a third win in a row, a win this week, and he would join the likes of Cale Yarborough, Darrell Waltrip, Dale Earnhardt, Harry Gant, Bill Elliott, Mark Martin, Jeff Gordon, and Jimmy Johnson as drivers who have won 4 straight races. Wow. Some pretty rarefied air. So what do you think of the start of the season for C. Bell?
You know, just you say those names right there. A lot of those names were from my younger day era, and maybe 1 or 2 of them a little bit before, but.
And all of them but one Hall of Famers.
Yes, those were the Michael Jordans, Tom Brady's, Babe Ruth's, you know, John McEnroe's of the NASCAR world in their time. And Christopher Bell, Heather, he could very well win another couple more, you know, with what's coming up. He could do it. I mean, I'm not going to be surprised if he does.
I mean, Vegas, yep. Homestead, Martinsville are all really good tracks
all
for
right
him.
There.
And Darlington, Bristol.
Darlington, Bristol. I mean, he could win 10 here probably, you know, before the summer hits. So I'm impressed. I'm happy for the young man. It seems like he's been a guy that no matter how well he does, and no matter how much and I say you know, the outside, the NASCAR fan world, spectator world, and people that are involved in it too, but you know, we always say how good Christopher Bell is and how much he can win, but it's almost like nobody really wants to give him credit for being the guy. You know, we look at Kyle Larson and Joe Logano and
Blaney,
you know, Denny Hamlin and Blaney and on and
Chase.
On. And all those guys, those guys are right, they're on the edge of being Michael Jordans and Larry Birds and Roger Maris's and whoever of the sport also. They've done incredible things, and they're incredibly talented individuals. But Bell is, you know, he seems to be doing this pretty easily.
Yeah.
That's the scary thing.
Well, the first 2 were, and when I talked to him last week on the podcast, the first 2 he wasn't even expecting to win, and he wasn't the dominant car per se. They just had good strategy, fast car, right place at the end of the race. Yep. Last week at Phoenix, it was his race. It
was his race. And I was thinking about this today. You know, I think he's taken another step in his progress, because that was a race. Yes, it was his race. And then you throw that, oh no, here's a last lap caution come in, a last lap, you know, green, white, checkered restart. He's got his teammate, Denny Hamlin, who's very good at places like Phoenix. And, of course, the adorned GOAT right now of NASCAR racing, Kyle Larson, right behind him, all over him. And, you know, there was a lot of opportunities for that race to get away from Bell. You know, I mean, a lot of things could have happened. And, you know, he could have been conservative and let somebody rough him up a little bit and take that spot. The guy didn't budge.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just like, I got this. Everybody calm down. And no, Denny, you're not going to pass me on the outside. And Kyle, you're not going to pass me on the inside. I've got the best car here. I've got this figured out. It's my race to win. I don't want to hear nothing about it. Checkered flag, what's for lunch? And that to me is confidence. It's confidence in yourself. It's confidence in the people around you. It's confidence in your equipment. It's confidence in the strategy. They all know that they've got each other's back. You know, it's that old thing called momentum, and they're going to ride that horse into Las Vegas this weekend. He's great on those top tracks. His company has a great history there. They're going to run good. The cars are fast. Okay, somebody's got to step up and beat him. So I'm glad for him. I know you are too. And yeah, we are trying to be impartial, but he's a good young man. Yeah. I think he's good for the sport, and he's kind of quiet. You know, he just sits over there. Well, and as he said
last week, I'm his favorite reporter, so.
That's true. He doesn't know me, but this is, anyway, she's my connection to Christopher Bell. But, You know, it's just I'm glad for it. You know, and I was thinking too, you know, today about it. You know, there's some talk and discussion about him running sprint car races and racing a lot during the off season. You know, and I think Bell is at the point he's young enough, and his body is not used up. His mind is young enough. He's still young and full of vinegar and hungry and wants to get better and wants to be the best guy out there. And I think it's, you know, at this time, this time in his life, I think he's got the energy, I think he's got the spunk, I think he's got the strength and everything to run a lot of races. And Heather, I think it gives him a little bit of advantage when the race season starts. His timing is already there. He's already used to the strains, the mental strains, the physical strains, the psychological strains that comes along with racing a 500-mile race or a 3-hour race or a 3.5-hour race against the best in the world, and it becomes easy to him. And I think some of the other drivers that it's better for them to take some time off because they're, you know, they're getting like me, not quite like me, but they're getting older and they get tired. They're not only physically but mentally. They need the rest instead of the time to keep on building their repetition. And man, but I just, you know, Bell's got it all together. That team's got it all together, and they're going to be winning races till somebody figures out how to beat them.
Yeah, if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man.
Got to beat the man.
Catherine Legg became the first woman to start a Cup race in 7 seasons. She ran last week at Phoenix. She did not really have a great race. Now, she was not in great equipment at all, but there's been some debate between her and Elio about NASCAR and the way they approve drivers to run the Cup Series. So I ask you, does success in other series prepare you to run in Cup, and should these drivers get approval?
Well, I think it's a sharp-edged, razor-edged sword that we're walking with that. I will say this for Catherine. I don't know the young lady. I really don't know a lot about her. I haven't followed her in her career or anything. Phoenix is pretty hard for somebody to come in and drive a Cup car.
With no practice. With
no practice, and just step in and say, okay, and she's not in a top-tier car. Now, I'm not knocking anybody else's, the equipment she was in, the people she was driving for, anything. Hey, I work for...
Look, B.J. McLeod does the best he can with the circumstances he has, right. But that's probably considered the 36th car or 37th car in the garage.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I would have... You know, I don't know why. I have no clue why they picked Phoenix. I'm certain it was because of funding, you know, that drove her to run that race in some way, shape, or form, and that's fine. The funding has to be there for this to happen. If not, somebody's going to go broke. But I wish it would have been somewhere that was a little bit easier than Phoenix. Phoenix is not an easy place. It's difficult. It's very technical, and even the best drivers have difficulty sometimes. So I don't know. I'm going to, like, on her, me personally, I'm going to just withdraw judgment for right now until she gets another shot at somewhere else. For Elio to go to Daytona, I think as far as him being capable of doing what he was asked to do, I think that guy, he's been racing long enough in IndyCar. He's had a lot of success in IndyCar. That's not easy to do. I don't think that I don't think that it was a bad thing to let him come in and drive. He could handle it. He could handle it. He could handle the pressure. He didn't do very well. You know, he struggled. He didn't do very well. And I think it, you know, let's face it. I mean, it's would an Australian rules league football player who was a star be able to come here, play in the NFL, and do well?
You know, the thing is though, we let Shane Van Gisbergen drive when he hadn't driven before, and he won the first race and he came in.
You're exactly right.
I think, you know, people are putting a lot of focus on these two because it didn't go very well, but there are certainly guys that come in and run Truck Series races and ARCA races and Xfinity Series races that have less of a business being on track than these two did. And so I think it's really hard to pass judgment on them because they had a bad day or they had a tough race or they weren't in great equipment or whatever the deal may be when the sport routinely lets people on track that are less qualified. That's just my opinion.
Like I say, it's a little bit, it's muddy waters. I think it's hard to make those decisions. I think it's razor edge. I know NASCAR has turned down some individuals who wanted to. I remember 3 or 4 years ago, it was Jennifer Jo Cobb was going to run Cup. And at first they said, yeah, it's going to happen, all this stuff like that. And then all of a sudden,
well, and they didn't let Mike Wallace run Daytona this year.
Well, and he's 65, which they said that was the reason. Plus, he hadn't been in a Cup car in how many years?
I think it has to be a case-by-case basis. And I also think it has to be track-specific, too, because they are going to let Casey Mears run at Martinsville in a few weeks. He hasn't been in the Cup car since 2019, I think it is.
Yep.
So I think, you know, their tendency is going to be to let them run the shorter tracks because it's less dangerous, obviously, because the speeds aren't as quick.
It is.
So I think it has to be a case-by-case basis, but I think world-class drivers, and I consider her to be a world-class driver. She ran the fastest lap ever by a woman in the Indianapolis 500. So, and she's won champ car races or, you know, the sports car races before. So, I mean, I think that you have to let them have a chance. I mean, you do.
I mean, I think if they just step back and let's step back and said no, we're not letting outside people in. There's a period until you go through our, you know, our step ladder series, run the trucks, run the Xfinity cars or whatever, and prove what you can do in stock cars. You know, if that was the case, we wouldn't have Shane Van Gisbergen.
And we wouldn't have had Marcus Ambrose, and we wouldn't have had Juan Pablo Montoya.
That's
and
exactly
there's
right.
a list of, I mean, there's also a list of people that came over that didn't succeed. Dario Franchitti, Sam Hornish. I mean, it just happens. Some people can adapt to this type of driving. Some people can't. It doesn't matter if you come from a stock car or an Indy car or Australian supercars. Some people have the talent and some don't. You don't know until you put them in a car.
You don't know, and I think that to me, Van Gisbergen, if you think they're for what, probably at least a 6 or 8 month period. He was the biggest story that we had. He was the biggest story in NASCAR, and it's still a big story. He's now in the Cup Series every week, and he's now trying to swing at them fast 103 mile an hour spitballs, you know, and stuff. And you know, it's difficult. It's difficult. What Shane Van Gisbergen did, even though it was in a perfect situation for him, as far as his craft, his skill set, his experience of top driving, when he won at Chicago, that was perfect for him. But even so, that was a huge accomplishment. And that guy's got a tremendous talent. I look at it like it's kind of a little bit of a shame that this wasn't 10 years ago when he came in, when he was a little bit younger. But, you know, he's had a great career over in the Supercar Series, which by the way, is just fantastic racing.
Yeah.
It is great. I kind of wish somehow we'd learn some of that from them, because it's super racing. It's very entertaining. But I agree with you. I don't know how, you know, I don't know how we would, you know, control it to where people could not get chances. I don't think there's anything wrong with the fact that they let Catherine Legg run Phoenix in a Cup car. I don't see how you can, you know, hit somebody in the head with a rock because of that. And I don't think it was a bad thing that we had Elio Castroneves at Daytona. I know there was something with him. There was, you know, was a little bit of controversy about, okay, well, he's automatically
and
in
that's
the race.
That's a whole different story.
But listen, anybody who would ever meet Elio Castroneves, I had the privilege of being around him when I worked for Penske and a little bit after, and I see him. He is just,
he's good for racing.
Magnetic.
No, he's good for racing.
He's great for anything he's doing.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, he's at the kind of the end of his career. He's in probably the winter of his career. But this guy was, he is incredibly talented and also very intelligent about racing. And again, I would like to have seen him do this, you know, 10, 12 years ago. But I don't think Roger Penske was going to let that happen. I used to ask him when I would see him at Penske shop, I said, man, you need to drive a truck. Come on, man, you need to drive a stock car. And he said, oh, Chris, I'd love to. You guys, I just love to do it. I think I'd have lots of fun, hit people and all this stuff. He was really cool. Yeah. Cool guy. It's a guy that a personality that would do well to be in NASCAR. It wouldn't take long. He'd have a huge fan base.
He's got one anyway, just from his IndyCar days. All right, so this week NASCAR heads to the first mile and a half of the season. That's crazy to think that we're just now getting to mile and a half racetrack. We're going to Vegas. So what's at stake for maybe some of the drivers who have gotten off to a slow start because of all the wild card races?
Well, I think for them, it's like they're looking at the drivers and the crew chiefs and the race engineers and the people who are part of the simulation exercise before each race. If they start a month and a half before each race of running simulation for each one, and Las Vegas no different. Now it's like what they call a normal track. It's a mile and a half. They don't have an aero package. There's not going to be a two wide draft, like Atlanta or Daytona. It's not a road course. There's not going to be any, well, I'm not going to say there's going to be any shifting, but there's not going to be any hard braking and 3 or 4 shifts, But Las Vegas is a tough racetrack. It's out there in the desert, so there's a lot of sun baking on that asphalt, and all year round usually, and it breaks it up a little bit, makes it crumbly and makes it bumpy and so on and so forth. There's some pretty harsh bumps down in the middle of 1 and 2, especially on the bottom groove, probably the bottom groove and a half. It's because that's where the tunnel is for infield access. It's usually very windy out there, and it'll blow sand across the racetrack. So these issues that I just talked about present some problems for the drivers to try to navigate this and try to be aware of what's going on. And then especially when the wind gusts and stuff, it's also like the spotters and the crew chief need to communicate to the driver, say, hey man, look, it looks like the wind's picking up, blowing across turn 3 to turn 1 or whatever it is. This probably gonna make your car drive a little bit different. It's gonna be some changes, and you better be aware of it. So I think the communication factor is at a premium for this race, going from daylight to dark or from cloudy to sunny or whatever makes a big difference of that racetrack also. It changes a lot. So, but I think a lot of guys, like you talked about, that have had a rough start to this season so far with all the different, the different racetracks, the speedways, the road courses, the Phoenix itself is a different racetrack. It's just a Phoenix, is all it is. That's all you can say. Now they get back to something that they do a lot every year, and I think that will maybe give some of them a little bit of comfort and a little bit of confidence going into this weekend to say, okay, here, and look, we can get back to what we normally do, we know most about. We got a chance here to make up some ground, make up some time, get back in the game. We're going to Homestead, which is another, after this, another mile and a half, kind of the same thing, just a little bit slower. And then they go to Old Martinsville. That'll be beat and bang, and everybody knows about that. And Heather, it's just about a month till Bristol. I can't wait. It's Bristol, baby, just about. So anyway.
Yeah, I know you're fired up.
Oh, I love it.
Joining us now is Alex Bowman. And Alex, I guess I got to ask you, top 10 at the road course, I think 7th in points at this point. Pretty good start to the season for what's been an unconventional start to the year. How do you feel about how it's gone?
Yeah, it hasn't been bad. Daytona was decent for us. Atlanta, we got caught up in that crash. And then, Coda, we got a gift with that caution falling when it did, and we were able to capitalize on it and end up with a top 10. I felt like we had a top 5 car for sure. And just after that penalty, unfortunately, they called the penalty really late, and then the caution came out, so I couldn't serve it. Had to go to the back. Got spun out like the second lap after the restart. Got another penalty. Like, we had a mess going, and we were looking at finishing 31st, and that caution saved us. So certainly, could have been way worse there. And I think we're I'm glad to capitalize on that and end up solid. So yeah, we're not bad in points. Wish we were better, but we're headed in the right direction.
How do you like the start to the season? Because in the past, it was always like we do Daytona, but then the real season starts when we go to the West Coast. Well, now we're 3 weeks into it when the quote real season starts. I don't feel like you can say that anymore because there's so much of the season that's already gone by with 3 races. So, do you like the challenge, or would you have liked to have had like a semi-normal track in the mix to start the year?
Yeah, honestly, with the traditional ovals that they keep taking away and keep adding speedways and road courses and that sort of thing, like I feel like everywhere is just normal at this point, right? Like you have to be good on road courses, you have to be good on super speedways. Um, all that stuff is in the playoffs, right? So it all matters. And while what happens on the last lap at Daytona can sometimes be luck, it's not luck to put yourself in position to capitalize on it. And there is a lot that goes into those races at being successful. And same for Atlanta, probably even more so. So just trying to be good at all that stuff. I mean, Phoenix, it's like the first short track race, but racing in general, like you got to be good everywhere these days, I think.
When I think of you and I think of the 48 team, I think of sneaky good, right? You're not a guy that people talk about in conversations of, oh, they're really good at this track or they're really good at that track. But you show up to almost every track and you're really good. Do you like being under the radar, or do you wish that you were just good and not sneaky good?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like attention, so I'm totally fine with it. I do wish. I mean, there are definitely places we struggle at, right? That I want to be really good everywhere, and going to Coda, like, or, I guess everybody forgot that we were really good there. Like, we've never been bad at Coda. Like, we ran ninth from the back in stage 3, and that's the worst we've ever run there by a lot. So, yeah, I mean, some places it'd be nice if you got a little credit, but at the same time, I don't like attention. So I'm all good flying under the radar. As long as we're still stacking trophies, I'm totally fine with it.
So, what's the next step for you? You've had years where you've won a bunch of races, you've made deep-ish runs in the playoff. What's the next step for the 48 team? What do you want to accomplish this year?
I mean, I think getting back to winning multiple races is a big thing for us. Getting back to the round of 8, even though we really did get there last year. I think we have our list of goals, that Blake and I have, and yeah, I mean, I think we did do a lot of really good things last year. Like we had some spells of not running very well, but we ended the season running really well. We did a really good job through the playoffs. Obviously, we got back to victory lane, kind of did all the things that were really on our list, and this year I think just continuing to improve on that. Sport has a lot of ups and downs, right? So it's hard to say, like, it's hard to predict how things are going to be, but I think we can be really strong this year.
Speaking of ups and downs, how do you balance that in an organization like Hendrick Motorsports? Because obviously, all 4 of you want to be champions. All 4 of you want to be the one. But at the end of the year, there's only going to be one guy that had the best season of you guys, right? There's only one champion. There's only one, top dog in the last couple of years as far as where they've gone in the playoffs. That's been Williams. So, I mean, how do you balance that in your organization and still, I guess, help each other out and do the things, because you have to be able to do that to be successful.
Yeah, for sure. I've kind of been on different sides of it, right? Like until next gen, we were kind of like the second best team here, I felt like. And the last couple of years, we've obviously with injuries and kind of everything that's gone on, we haven't been that. So just trying to do the right things, continue to work hard, and it's all a process, right? Everybody here is really, really good. So just trying to continue to get better and learn from my teammates. I think we all work really well together, which is a good thing. Like I enjoy working with all 3 of them and the 3 crew chiefs. So yeah, I mean, I think it's been good. We're all in a good spot, and we all want each other to succeed. So doing all we can to make that happen.
For my final thought this week, I want to talk about the point system. Oh, yes, the age-old complaint about the point system. Christopher Bell has won 3 of the 4 races this year, and he is not your points leader. It might sound familiar if you've been around the sport for a while. The reason the current point system has evolved into what it is because the year-long point system, the previous point system, people complained that it didn't put enough emphasis on winning. In 2003, Matt Kenseth won the championship. He won 1 race. Ryan Newman won 6 races, but he was not your champ. And that was kind of the season where NASCAR and their fans pushed to the point where it was like, we got to make winning more important. It became the chase and now the playoffs. And that's where we're at now. When it's all said and done and they reseed, Christopher Bell, if they, as the points run right now, which everybody hates that because there's so much racing to go. But as the points run right now, he's your number 1 seed in the playoffs. He's got more playoff points. He's won more races. He's the number 1 guy. He's not the leader in the quote unquote traditional points, even though they're not really traditional because we've got stage racing and bonus points and things that didn't exist under the year-long system. He's not your playoff. I mean, he is your playoff number 1 seed. He's not your points leader. They're kind of 2 different things. I think it'll all come out in the wash when it's all said and done. So I don't think you have to worry about it. But the thing that just always amuses me is that NASCAR fans, I love y'all. I'm one of y'all. I complain like y'all. But if a collective we as fans did not have something to complain about, I don't know what we would talk about as fans. I don't know what we would say to each other when we saw each other at the track. Like there's always has to be something we don't like, something we want changed, something that bothers them. I want it to go back to the way it was. I don't care that there was only 3 cars on the lead lap. Bristol was better when we were, finishing with the leader 6 laps ahead of everybody else. There's always something. I'm trying to be much more present in the moment and enjoy the racing that's on the track now because that's what we have. And driver for driver up and down the field, the talent is as deep and as good as it's ever been in the sport. So I want to enjoy that and also enjoy the mastery that is the start that Christopher Bell has had to the season. Not just the wins, but the wins at 3 different tracks. He can make it 4 straight wins. Only 8 other drivers have done that before. And I promise you 8 other drivers have not done that on a super speedway, a short track, a road course, and a 1.5 miles. I would have to go back and look, but I feel pretty confident knowing the list of the 8 guys that have done it before. They probably didn't do it in that diversity of a track. Maybe the 2 later ones might have a little bit, but it's really an impressive time, a really fun time to be a fan of the sport. So relax on the points. Only 4 races into this. A lot's going to change between now and September. Enjoy the ride. Thanks for joining us on the Backstretch. We'll see you next week.